Hey, what's up? I'm Coach Oyama. Uh, I have a passion to help you improve, and I specialize in macro. And I do all my coaching for free. All you got to do is DM. Here's my contact and like my experience before. Get right into the replay. So, I remember doing a replay before on you on Ana on the Lucio map. I don't know what Esperanza, I think, but from what I remember from last time, you had some really good gameplay. Just a couple of things to work on in terms of uh, positioning and the amount of value you get out of Ana, and you played Ana the entire time. Being able to use Ana aggressively. So just going into this replay initially to begin with, I'm just looking at the team comps while I'm watching. Oh, very nice anti-nade. Then your team was able to follow up on that. Okay. Yeah, your team didn't really follow up on that, but if you look at your team composition versus their team composition, I feel like perhaps we didn't properly assess the risk of being up against the Junker Queen. And you did anti the enemy team and decide to push in, but your monkey wasn't, just wasn't feeling it, I guess, and didn't want to push into the enemy team, so, you got discorded. It is what it is. Yeah, I do think that your team should have pushed up with you, but it is what it is sometimes. In comp, you just can't have everything go your way. But to be fair, you do have a very spammy team comp here, so I wasn't very surprised when your team decided not to push it. Okay. I remember your mechanics playstyle now. This fight played very well. Can't really screw it up on Baptiste. Just kind of exist against this enemy team comp, and they're gonna die on point because they have a Zenyatta and no Brigitte to help them. I think, honestly, the one thing that I want to point out so far is control. Because on one hand you can be is it? Shoot, what's that one Korean player? Asking? I forgot his name. But he might have the shaky aim. I forget who has the shaky aim. It's one Korean player. But then you can be Dante and have the smoothest aim in the world. And the only difference between the two, like if you're still hitting your shots, is you're able to like gauge what's actually happening around you better. So you're able to have better decision making and be way more controlled about it. Okay. Yeah, so I feel like you have a good output of what the value you're producing for your team here, but it's not controlled to the point where you can see consistency and improvement. So it feels like you're overexerting to create as much value as you can if you're just... Maybe this is like a very high sensitivity issue or something. Or maybe you just like shake your hand due to like unrelated reasons that are unbeknownst to me. Yeah, okay, so what I noticed is you're not properly assessing threats and not properly like pre-buffering what can happen in your head. So what I mean by that is if we go back here into this fight with the Sigma, when you lose this angle here and you begin to back up into main with your Sigma, I feel like you're a bit panicked and not aware of your surroundings. So the window comes out and your Sigma ults. All is fine. He gets critical, and then you throw the lamp a bit, honestly a bit late, and then you're not ready for your Sigma to go down to such a low health here, where, if I were watching a different player, I would say you should be aware that your Sigma's in a really bad position here. He doesn't have a shield, and that there are about 3 enemies in front of him shooting him. So he's about to be really low really quickly, and you should be hovering your shift button because you know this lamp's going to die immediately, and you know that your Sigma's right about to die. And instead of focusing on your Sigma, you focus on to get the kill on the Zenyatta. You might just have a different feeling priority than what I think it should be, but I feel like it would have been better to just make sure that your Sigma didn't die there. That was definitely possible. And then you kind of panic windowed over here and didn't get full value out of your window because it was like a panic for the Sigma. Whereas if we just slowed down and started thinking about the possibilities and you're managing your expectations for the team fight and how it affects your decision making, you could have foresaw that your Sigma was going to get low and kept them at around half health, and then it's a really small like chain snowball reaction, and then they're gonna have to commit even more to pull the window out of you, so your window will inherently get more value because it's trading for more resources from the enemy team. And then this team fight here, I like the kiting. I like how you're actively assessing how the space of the map is working. Usually like any rank slower, and then healers just are not aware. But one thing is, it's okay if you just get disconnected from your Sigma. The entire premise of Junker Queen is to get value out of doing stupid plays by running into people, and if you just kite the Junker Queen, you're gonna deny her a lot of value. So I feel like that's your #1 priority, especially since they don't have a Lucio. When she has shout, you got to be very aware of it, and because Junker Queen's kind of new, I feel like a lot of people don't recognize it as much as, like, for example, if a ball has his full cooldowns, you're going to be playing a bit more careful. Like, you know, you see the ball grappling and you're like, he has shields and he has pile drive because he hasn't done those like recently. So I'm going to be a bit more careful in position, so if he pile drives me on non-B open. Same thing with Junker Queen when she has her shout and her axe. Don't stand B open near her. So now she used her axe and the shout, and so now you can like walk in. Yep. She's about to have it again. And her shout's up on her next axe on here. So got to be very careful, because like right now you're, yeah, I mean she is low, so I won't discount the fact that you're pushing forward and taking and playing aggressive. But yeah, this team fight does get very sloppy. Yeah, in times like these, it's mostly just about mechanics and playing corners, like close playing corners on who wins the fight. Okay. One thing that I would say is get to the coast, please. If you're playing near these windows, the angles that you're able to use against the enemies, when you reload, then you're not stuck in the middle, because I notice that you're very panicky in the middle, and you're not able to absorb enough information about where enemies are and properly address what's going on in the team fight. Because like watching your gameplay, it makes me a bit dizzy, and it's like there's zero way that you're going to be ult tracking and fight planning and fight managing and understanding what's going on in the fight right now. Like, if I asked you who's alive, I couldn't even say who's alive, because I'm too busy focused on the mechanics of what's going on. You're like shaking everywhere, and it's really hard to understand the team fight. So I think that's one thing to work on. And even though like your shaky playstyle does kind of define your mechanics and like how you play right now, and could be the reason why you're in GM, and like, you know, in Plat maybe you were very controlled and then you started like trying more on your mechanics and got shaky and then got into GM. I think we're at a point now where you have to start to control your mechanics and be very controlled and precise, so then you can understand what's going on in the team fight. Otherwise, your decision making is never going to get consistently grow to be better. Okay, so I can see in your body language you're kind of scouting here, getting a feel for what the enemy has in their team comp. Now watch out your LOSing main over here when you're doing that. Just a quick thought, because if they're on like Hanzo or Widowmaker somehow on this map, then that could be very disastrous. Better to be careful than negligent. Okay, very good. Very good. They get rolled over because they have a Junker Queen and their Chaser flanked early. Very good. Alright, now we're just going to wait for the next hub. I'm not going to zoom forward. I feel like you have a very conservative Baptiste play, to be honest. Yeah, I think a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is actually mechanics and not the decision making, because you can't get to the decision making once you until you have your mechanics down, and I feel like you're at the point where it's like your mechanics and your not necessarily tunnel vision, but the amount of attention you put into your mechanics is overwhelming, and like drawing, like if you have like $100, you're spending 80 of it on your mechanics, and you only have $20 left over for your decision making. And so until we can like get the same like buy the same things with but cheaper with your mechanics and only spend like 30% of your mental energy on mechanics and then go 70% to decision making, then we can talk about more decision making improvement. So for example, in this fight here, I can tell that you're not even thinking about like decision making, like should I window main? Like you can window your Reinhardt here, you can try to lamp out yourself and then jump up the high ground. There's a lot of things that you can do, but I can tell that you're just so very preoccupied with your movement and your aim that you're not able to handle the decisions. Yeah, so I don't want to overload you with like do this, and you're not like equipped enough to handle it because you're really focused on your mechanics right now. But the funny thing is you're focused on your mechanics and it's you're not doing bad with your mechanics either, so you're able to carry yourself all the way up to like GM level mechanics. And so from here it's really about, you know, finding more consistency, like leveling up your gameplay. If I'm like talking just about the broad index of things, when you get to low GM, that's about where mechanics starts to get into play. Or you can have like either really good mechanics or really good game sense in low GM. Once you hit mid GM, you need decent mechanics and decent decision making. So I feel like you're just about to break into that mid GM because especially like in terms of looking at players, you can't really teach mechanics. You can ask them to practice, but if it's not clicking, it's not clicking. But you can teach game sense, which is good because you already have the mechanics. Now we just need to teach the game sense, and then you'll get into that like low mid-ish GM. Then once you get above that game sense, and you'll get into like mid GM where you have your mechanics pretty much under control, and then high GM is like you have your mechanics very under control, and then you're on a different level of thinking. And then very high GM, like professional play, you're thinking like steps ahead, and you know every single possibility, and your mechanics are just like breathing. 0% of your brain power goes into mechanics pretty much. Not 0%, you know, because it is an FPS game, but most of your thinking is going to be based off of decision making and not, or most of your attention is going to be thinking and decision making rather than aiming. Very nice tracking on that, Baptiste. I think I will give you some ult tracking though, so like just give you steps in the right direction, because these fights here, especially on off, it's very important to keep your lead off the first fight. Usually whichever team wins the first fight will win the entire round. It's just the way it's built in. But instead of just using your window for yourself, you can combo with your Reinhardt, you can combo with one of your DPS players. And scroll back, I was zooming forward because I thought this fight was over. But if you're able to first of all ult track, or know how to ult track for your own ultimate, and then know how to ult track for the enemy ultimates, you're going to get a lot more value in understanding the possibilities. Like if I window here, usually it's really good, but because they have this ultimate or because they have this win condition or this one thing, then I shouldn't use my window here, but instead use it over here, which would usually be like only like C tier. Oh man. That's rough for the enemies in Yada. Oh man, alright. And then I guess I can talk a little bit about win conditions, because I feel like your gameplay kind of does exemplify that you, or like show me that you pretty much understand win conditions. But I like to emphasize it even more because I feel like everything's much easier if you know what to do and know like the easiest way to do things, because you know there's a hard way to do things and then there's the easy way to do things. Work smarter, not harder. And so when we're looking at these team compositions, when they were on Zenyatta, they're trying to gain more angles, and if you close their angles, it closes off their Discord orb, which is the entire win condition of their team composition. And in comp, it's not as prevalent, but you're still going to be battling with these top-heavy forces if we're looking from the top down. You know, like just get a Widowmaker and hit all your shots, right? Why does that work in ranked? Because it's because of these like top-heavy forces where it's like, if you have Brawl, it's going to counter the Widowmaker by restricting her angles, and it's going to be very hard for her to get shots off. And so for you, taking this flank is like one of the things that I'm going to say, because now you don't have your cooldowns. If we're looking at the overarching image of what your team's trying to do, they're using the angles and space to condense down during and draw the enemy resources, and then go explosive on one engage. So when your team's going explosive here on this engage, which I would say is kind of a dive, but it's kind of a brawl. So it's like a spam dive hybrid. So when they're diving in here with this pile drive, you're not able to do that exact same flank, and now you're kind of just healing full health targets, and so your entire team's like overarching thesis of what's going on is not aligned with you. What's right will start working more often, and you won't get away with just like lucky fights. And the skin is pretty cool. I haven't bought the battle pass, so I don't have any skins. So going over how their team comp changes when they now have a, they were on Diva, now they're on Hog. It doesn't change too much, except for the fact that Hog is literally the worst tank right now, in my opinion. And so if you guys are able to hold more angles onto them, you don't need to be explosive, because your ball's going to get hooked every single time, and that's pretty bad for your ball. But if you literally don't get hooked and your ball only rolls through a number of pile drives, that Hog has to save hook for the pile drive, so it's a pretty even trade. Except for the fact that the ball can always initiate when he's like ready to, and it won't punish him if the Hog hooks him, or punish him as harshly. And so, because your team is really pushed up here, I think you guys could have afforded, I mean, you can't control this, but you could have afforded letting them come out, and then drawing more resources from them before engaging. So I think that you know that, but then again, like, you weren't really peeking and taking offensive plays as compared to before, when you were very explosive and you needed to like save your hard cooldowns for like when in the setup phase here of this team fight. Before, you were playing, your team was playing more for a dive where it's like ball pile drives in, you have to be ready to follow up on that pile drive and go in with your tracer. But now, since they're on Hog, it's more like you want to draw out the team fight very draw out their resources and win over the long run by stretching them thin, stretching their attention far and thin. So here, this is really good where you guys are applying constant pressure, and I feel like now you can start to take these flanks and engages and start playing aggressively, because if you're causing havoc in their backline, even if you're not killing anything, you're adding so much more value to your team's win condition, or at least like your team's overarching thesis of what your team wants to do. So this constant pressure is good, and then but having you unpeak versus letting them reset. If you're continuing to peak and playing aggressively, then you're enabling your tracer here rather than waiting for like to heal your ball. Because if your ball resets and then they reset, they're actually stronger than your team. If you, or it's less optimal than if your entire team was just constantly applying pressure and drawing resources from the enemy team, because they can't rotate into you without resources. And especially since you're on defense, you can just exist on point without resources and still be able to hold the space and get value. And then, okay, let's reset here. I want to see how you use your ultimate, if there's any like forethought on where, when, who, how. Or ultimates. It looks like you guys are rotating left side here. Yeah, watch out for that rotate, because they could definitely kill you there. Okay. One thing I want to say is, I don't know, it's not super clear to me whether or not that ultimate provided the value that it was supposed to, but I feel like you guys could have waited a bit more and forced resources out of them again, because remember, it's like the overarching team image. If we look at when you use your ultimate and what it actually means for the enemy team, they counter it with just their Baptiste window, whereas they would have had to use this Baptiste window anyways if you were just sitting on point and you drew the Hog heal. Then the Hog has to fall back, and in order for them to maintain the point, the space on point, they have to use this window or something else and even more cooldowns. So you're kind of like in a situation where you're using leverage and trading your cooldowns like 2 for 1. Everything that you do, they have to do twice as much to keep their space on point, and they have to keep their space on point. So you're leveraging the fact that they let you rotate to point and you're on this point, especially since your ball already uses mines. If you hadn't used your rush yet and you're just sitting on point, and then you wait for them to overexert, and let's say they used Valk, and or their Hog started walking out and is looking for hook and then used heal, onto point, then after your Kitsune Rush is going to get so much more value rather than you initiating here. They kite it and they use barely anything to keep you guys off of point. So I don't know if that's like for you to process this, if that's more like intuition based off of the fight, or if it's more of a macro team comp oriented thing. I think it's more based off of just intuition and understanding that you didn't need to ult there and that it was a bit premature, or immature-ish ults. Yeah, okay. Just checking my notice real quick, making sure it's not important. Ish. Okay, so now your team comp changes yet again. So, ooh. Yeah, that was a really bad engage from your far. But needless to say, I think you know why you're on the Ana pick. Yep, to anti the hog. Yep. What is the Mercy just came over to Netflix and chill with you. Okay, but going into how you okay, you know what, I'm not even gonna review that fight. I'm just gonna talk about it because your team played that so poorly, it limited the amount of value that you can actually provide for them. But going into that fight, your entire point on Ana is to draw the resources by anting their hog, and then eventually you guys will be able to take angles and use those angles to kill them. Because, you know, their hog can't hold the space. He's going to get overwhelmed by so many angles and the anti-nade. He has to use all of his resources on the anti-nade instead of holding space. And then you guys will take space. Then eventually, you know, the comp shenanigans, sometimes, like, you just come back to fight and it's one. You're like, yeah, okay, cool. So, go back. Oh, man. We're in the ocean. Okay. I want to talk about, like, especially this first point here. Playing against the Jungle Queen is very one thing, but let's go over an Epic Pen, like 3 things that you can work on here. One, let's go over your mechanics. So, number 1, I feel like you're using like 80% of your brain for mechanics here. And it needs to be like, to get to the next skill level, I'm going to set like 30%. So, we're at like the low, like low GM-ish. I'm going off like Overwatch 1 SR. So if we're like 4K to 4.1, 4.2K, that's where like 80% of your brain are going to be on mechanics for you specifically as a player. For some other players, like for me, it's going to be like, my mechanics suck, but I'm all like brain power and I'm in low GM because of the brain power. So for me, I need to improve on mechanics. For you, we need to get your mechanics to be less of your brain power and start thinking more about threats. 2, you can start thinking about, I feel like, properly addressing from the top down image what your team comp's win condition is, and then how you can play for the win condition. This is a very higher level abstract concept that's going to get hard, like that's not very concrete and very hard to get used to, because it's only in the moments in which you're like, shoot, I shouldn't have done that, versus like, what should I do? It's kind of hard to like gauge what should I do, and it's easier to say, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. So when you make mistakes, you'll realize that, especially like that one really random flank on Kiriko where you flanked, use your abilities, and then your team went full in. And it's like, we could have predicted that your team was going to go full in by looking at your team comp and looking at the win conditions and what ults you have. And the fact that your team was trying to play explosive after drawing the enemy team's resources. So you went too early with your team, and that was just conflicting with your win condition. And so when you have a team comp like this, where you're very, very spammy, if you're looking to brawl in main, for example, on first point when you had a monkey, if you were looking to like dive in with your anti-nade, except your team just wasn't ready to do it, eventually it's the small things, you know, your team will like, hopefully, theoretically, that they're all playing together for the win condition, and they also have like thoughts about how to play for their win condition. So if you go on the line with that, you know, Jane's quote, one player making a mistake is a mistake, but an entire team doing a mistake is a strategy. Just align with your team and you'll get more, you know, kind of just trust that the win condition will work with your team and that your team will play with you for your win condition. And if you can be predictable almost with your team, then you'll get inherent teamwork rather than having to calm everything with your team. And then 3, I think let's start tracking ult tracking, because it'll determine how you can use your so the first step of ult tracking is understanding how your ult works with your own team's ults, or there's like multiple parts to the first part because it's like your own team's ults, also the enemy or the map, your own team's ults. Like if I have Genji Blade, it's very obvious. If I have a Nano, I just ult track. Diana has Nano, I have Blade. Let's hit it. And then on top of that, you got to start thinking about the map and the team comps. And so it's like if they have Lamp, if they have Speed, if they have Sleep, maybe I shouldn't Blade immediately, and that's still like ult tracking ish. But then also on top of that, if they have Whole Hog, if they have Shatter, if they have Sigma Flux, if they have Beat, if they have all these other things. And so it's the same thing whenever you have your ult on any other hero. It's just Genji Blade is like seemingly the most obvious because it's the most popular. And so for you, like ult tracking that Kiri ult or that Bat window, if you don't track for it, you'll not have consistency because you're like, oh shoot, I need to window here, rather than thinking about it and being like, okay, if I window here, it's not ideal, and I can just save it and like take this L and then have a really good window in a different opportunity, which I think I'll get even more value. And I can afford that because the point is here and my team comp win condition, their ults, my ults. And then that's like the highest form of ult tracking, or the highest form of ult tracking. What we'll eventually get to is fight planning, where you're able to communicate with your team, especially in a scrim setting, or even in comp, especially the high level tank players. They'll say they have these ults, we have these ults. We're going to try to play this, how we're going to play differently like this. So then we counter their ults. And when we do this, get ready to follow up on our ults, or, and it'll be an entire thing. And the best players will be able to do it really quickly and condense it down into like one sentence so everyone can understand it. But needless to say, we got to start somewhere. And starting somewhere is your own ult track, where your team, what ultimates you have with your team, how it fits into the team comp and the map, I guess, ish. And then after that, then we can add enemy ults, because tracking enemy ults is its own thing, because you got to assume like what ults do they have, and then you build off of them. But I think, in order of importance, actually, the 80% 80% of your mechanics needs to go down to 30. Start tracking the win conditions of the team comps and the flow of the fights. Spam, brawl, dive, and then from there it goes into umbrellas of hybrids and like what tempo, resources, angles, space. And then third, you can get into ult tracking and get yourself much better ults. I mean, it's weird because like it's only 1 out of 10 ults that you're doing that are like not that bad. Or in this game, your ults were like C tier. They weren't like all A's or S's. But if you're at an average of A and you get 1 F, then your average, or like 4 A's and 1 F still averages out to like a B minus or something like that. So if we can get 4 A's and 1 C, then your average is only an A minus, and that's a whole grade up just from getting that F to a C. And so it's in the one instance, consistency is not about how well you play at your best, but how not bad you play at your worst, and your baseline will go whatever. Good luck in your next rank games. If you have any questions, just ask me. See ya.